I realize this isn't typically what I tend to review, but when I find cool stuff, I do a review on it. I've known about these Kala U-bass, ukulele bass guitars for a while. If I'm being completely honest, I've seen them in a few music stores and kind of blown them off because I thought it was just going to be like a weird gimmicky thing. But about a month or two ago, I had someone send me a song to mix, and one of their comments was, "Hey, let me know what you think of the bass guitar tracks." And he didn't say anything else. And so got into mixing it, pulled up the bass, and it was really different than what I'm used to for what I thought was probably just a line-in bass guitar tone, but it worked really well for the song. So after I finished it, he was telling me, yeah, it's one of these Kala U bass guitars. Now, Kala does a few different configurations of these. You can get these with normal kind of strings, but the one that I chose to review and that I liked the most was this one with these rubber strings. I think technically they're polyurethane, but it ends up being a really loose tension, kind of rubbery feel of a string. And as a result, you get a very unique tone that sometimes kind of crosses over into upright bass territory. Now, I'm barely a good guitar player most days. I'm definitely not a bass guitarist, but saying that I was probably going to end up playing this a fair amount. I got the fretted version. They also make a fretless version. So if you're looking for something that kind of really goes in the upright bass territory and something that's a lot different, check out the unfretted. But I figured for the most part, most of the artists using this in the studio were probably going to be just typical, rock band bass guitarists or guys like me that can kind of play guitar and need to lay down a bass take. So I can tell you a lot about it and give you some of my opinions, but in a nutshell, I would say that this probably isn't going to be like a very heavy studio use instrument where you're using it on every track, but it sounds so different. You're not going to get this tone from any other bass guitar. So in that aspect, I think it's unique, and they're so affordable. Hopefully by the end of this, I think a lot of you studio owners are going to want to grab one of these because I thought it was going to be gimmicky, but after playing with it for a month or two, I've fallen in love with it. And I don't think it's something I'll use all the time again, but it just, in a few things, it's just been really solid and just, really gave me a cool, unique tone and, gave me something I couldn't get from anything else. So I've done, if you've seen some of my reviews over the last month, you've probably seen this in a few songs because I've been playing it and getting used to it. So this first one is more of an acoustic kind of song. I did a cover of a Dave Matthews song. So let's take a look at this real quick on that song.
All the rest I leave to you. Can't wait for the hour when the two things become this. Always all this trouble for a kiss from you. I do always. Oh yeah, yeah. There would go so again.
So in that song specifically, I was trying to mimic an upright bass a little bit, but I was only using the line end, just the piezo pickup. So let's listen to one more example. This one's a little bit more of a rock song, I guess you could say. I tried using a normal bass guitar on this song and it just wasn't fitting in well. I kind of just wanted something that was a little pushed back and was giving like the idea of there being some sort of bass note sitting under the song, but I didn't want to make it really like prevalent, I guess you could say. So I wanted it pushed back a little bit. So I tried a normal bass guitar, just wasn't working. Tried this, man, fit in perfectly. So let's take a listen to that on this next song.
This
One of the weirder things that I was curious to try on this was to try miking it and using the DI input as well. After doing those two songs, again, for those specific songs, I think it worked really well and served its purpose. Just plugging it in and getting the DI feed from it worked really well. The one downside to this instrument is that there's not really a ton of like presence in the upper frequencies or attack. At times it's not as full range as a normal electric bass guitar. That's neither a good thing or a bad thing. Again, I think that the strength of the U-bass is that it covers some really unique territory and does something that no other basses can do. So again, you know, some people might see this as being a downside to the U-bass, but you know, I don't think it's realistic to expect this to be able to do everything. It's kind of a niche instrument. So one thing I wanted to do is kind of, if I wanted to go for more of a traditional upright bass guitar tone, just using the piezo pickup didn't work out as well for me. I was missing some of like the string attack and some definition in the notes. You definitely feel it down low, but I thought that a lot of times it would kind of get lost in the mix because there's so much low end information. So I wanted to play around with miking it as well as feeding it the DI feed and mixing between those two. So let's listen to that real quick just on its own. At this point, I'm really kind of pushing the limits of what this instrument can pull off. Again, I don't think that it's really designed to be a true acoustic instrument that you know, sit in a jam circle and play along with guitarists and other people. It's pretty quiet acoustically. It's specifically made to be plugged in. But when you use something like this in a studio environment, like I'm going to use it in, you know, you kind of test things and push it to extremes and figure out what it can and cannot do. So all I'll say is that in a studio environment, you're probably going to want a pretty low noise preamp and microphone combination, as well as a pretty quiet acoustical environment. And I kind of hit that wall of figuring out, man, this is a pretty quiet instrument. So let's take a look at that real quick, just to show you, you know, how loud it is. You're hearing me speak through this microphone right now at the same level that I've been miking the U-bass with. You can probably hear some birds flying around. That's because the mic's probably pushing around 50 dB of gain, which is a fair amount. Just speaking right now, I have a decibel meter on the floor. I'm hitting around 55 dB, maybe 60 if I just speak a little louder. Let me play the U-bass real quick. So the decibel meter on the floor is reading between 45 and 55 dB playing the U bass. I would say it's a little quieter than when you're speaking at a lower level. So keep that in mind. It is a pretty quiet instrument. I don't think it's going to be loud enough to be able to compete acoustically with other instruments in a room if you're jamming. Even just one acoustic guitar, it's going to be a little hard to fight other instruments level-wise. But even miking it, it is a bit of a quieter instrument. You can probably hear birds chirping in the background and stuff. It's morning, so they're pretty active. And I've got a pretty quiet studio, but I would say keep that in mind. If you're going to mic this, you probably need a little bit cleaner preamp and a quieter mic. This Chandler Type L is, I would say it's quieter than most mics in terms of its self-noise, and I'm just going into my API preamps on my console, so nothing crazy, but do keep that in mind if you're going to mic it. It is a pretty quiet instrument. So that's a pretty good overview of the Kala U-Bass. Again, I think specifically for studio use, if you own a studio and you have a bunch of unique instruments, this would be a good thing to add to your lineup. And again, I don't think it's going to end up being an everyday use bass guitar, but it's going to be a bit niche. But man, when it works so well because you can't get this tone out of any other bass guitars. You could try and get close, but it would be a lot of work. But in terms of being a bit critical about it, because there's a lot of things I love about it, the two things that I would say that were problems were, number one, the polyurethane strings take a while to kind of set and stay in tune. That's not a fault of the guitar. It's just the nature of these rubber strings. The tension ends up being pretty loose on them. I've had this for about a month and a half and played it a little bit every day, and it's just getting to the point where these rubber strings are starting to really sit in and stay in tune over the course of a session. So if you get one of these, or you've had one and you end up changing strings on it and you have the polyurethane rubber strings, plan on giving it a few weeks to kind of really set in to where you're going to really use it in some critical areas. The only other complaint about this was that the pickup in it, the piezo pickup, is just a little noisy sometimes. If you're going to use this in music that's really quiet, like acoustic folk music, and noise floor is a concern, you might run into some problems. But the cool solution to that is that I was able to use like isotope noise reduction on this, and it solved it. And isotope especially is kind of hit and miss in terms of noise reduction. Sometimes you can really hear what it's doing in context, and it kind of robs a lot of tone. There were no instances where I put isotope noise reduction over this and was able to hear any difference in the context of the song. And I think that's because most of the fundamentals of this instrument are pretty low. You can actually pretty much do a low pass up to like 4K sometimes and not hear a difference at all. So if you do run into noise floor issues with this, it's really easy to solve, fortunately, because it's not as full range of an instrument where there's a ton of critical tone where noise reduction usually makes a big difference. So those are probably my two biggest gripes with the instrument, but very easily solved. So yeah, really good instrument. I'd encourage everyone to check it out. And again, sometimes niche instruments are unobtainable because they can be very expensive. These range everywhere from like $200 up to $700. I think with this wood combination with the striped ebony, this was one of the more expensive ones, but they literally have these that start at like a couple of $100s. So as far as, a niche studio instrument goes, it's pretty affordable. And I think it's something that could realistically be thrown into any studio environment without, a huge investment. But yeah, really cool. Again, I'm doing a review on this because I found it so useful and so helpful, and I kind of wanted to destroy a lot of the stigmas that probably exist in the studio world for these, because I did the same thing. I thought it was going to be gimmicky and not very useful, and I was wrong. So that's why I've done this review. Check out the Kala U-Bass. They're awesome. Hey, buddy. Buddy, can you come lay down? Hi. Did you wake up from your nap? Wanna go lay down? I'm almost done. Yeah, it's okay. Why don't you go lay down? I'm almost done, okay? Oh, buddy. We'll go out in a minute, okay?